like, because we like imagine this world that we never lived, that it was like this perfect world, right? But it wasn't, like all of your traditional stories tell you. There's stories about adultery, there's stories about murder, there's stories about like what you were talking about, there's stories about leaving kids on trails. I'm sorry, and these are stories that are rooted in reality. These are things that really happened. You think it's heartbreaking to hear a story about a baby left on a trail? How about leave your baby on the trail and then tell me how heartbroken you are? Tell me about the world that forces you to do things like that and what sort of lessons that world would teach you, And so, yeah, our people were nice. But our people were nice because our world was hard. Mm-hmm. And our world was so hard that there was no reason to add to it. So you're correct.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And I think that this world that we live in today is also hard, but hard in different ways. Like, there's ways in which it's easy. There's good things about it, too, But the hardness about it is that, like, when you live in a world where you have almost absolute freedom, like if you're well-to-do in America, or if you're rich in America, you do whatever you want. Like, there are things that I love about being an American, and there are things that I think it's okay to embrace. I mean, like, this is what I talk about with violence. I'm going like, yeah, we're a culture of violence, and I like violence. Right? But, like, my whole point in bringing it up is to just bring attention to it and awareness and, like, look, this is our culture. Whether you like it or not, or whether you personally identify with it or not, this is our culture, and it has real consequences.
It's a fact.
Yeah, this is a fact, We love it. We love war, I love war. So this is actually something I just had to deal with my 7-year-old, who's going to be 8 this weekend, but he really likes Fortnite a lot, right? And Fortnite doesn't have any gratuitous blood in it, but you're shooting other people, right? And so, I allow him to play it, but I also talk to him about violence, right? Again, this is not a subject that's foreign to them. Like, they know that I was in the Marines, they know that I was at war, they know, they ask these stories, and I tell it to them. They're my boys, So I was actually remembering, it was a raid in Basra, which is in southern Iraq, and we were just on the border of Iran. And I remember that I was actually in a fighting hole that had been dug during the Iran-Iraq war. And we had a cobra in support of us, and it was flying in circles around us. And I just remember, thinking, I'm just really glad I'm on the side that I'm on. Just the violence that we brought. So I was remembering that, and then I was remembering that cobra that was flying around. And then, it never fired. It was just flying in support of us. Super menacing, super scary. You can't even imagine what it's like to, have these, these things. They're on your side, but they're super scary. So I was watching footage of them killing Taliban people in Afghanistan. And my son walked in, and he was watching, and it's all, footage behind, the heat vision goggles, right? So you can't see, gore and things like that, but it's very clear that what's happening is that these people are dying and they're being killed by these, and they are so scary, right? And so I let him watch it with me, only for the purpose of, at first he was, excited about it, and then, when he was watching this guy get exploded, I said, man, imagine how scary it would be to be that guy, This was one that was at night. He was up on a ridge at night, And they killed him. They destroyed him. They blew him up, and there was nothing he could do about it. This poor, you could see him try to run. Everywhere that he went, there was, explosives, right? And as soon as I said that to him, his whole attitude about it changed, because then he imagined himself as that guy, right? And this was the process that I went through too. Even going over there, is that I try to humanize these people, right? And I think it's really important to do it, because once you dehumanize them, that's once you dehumanize somebody, you kill them just like you kill a moose. It doesn't matter. Kill them because we do it every single day. Think about all the cattle we kill. Well, you can kill people just like that too once you dehumanize them, right? So we were on our way over there, and I remember my buddy he said, "I can't wait to kill me a," and I totally chewed his over it, right? Because it was all right, I get it, and that these are the guys that we were fighting. These are the quote-unquote bad guys or whatever, right? And when I was talking to him about it, he was like, hey, man, I was like, that's not, you shouldn't really think that way about it, right? Humanize, remember, this dude is just like us. He thinks he's fighting for his country. He's fighting for the freedom of his country. He believes that he's fighting for the right side, and so do we, right? And I was like, we'll kill him, right? But don't dehumanize him. Humanize him and then kill him. Right? So. So we were just talking about video games and violence in general, right? But so this is an example, though, right? Like, we're creating, like part of your culture, like I said, it's that scheme of information, and your parents like teach you these things, right? Like all cultures, right? Like when you look at them, one of the things that I appreciated most about like looking at Alaska Native cultures was that so many of them, it was like there's a recognition of human nature, that we're jealous, that we're petty, that we're all these things, right? That we recognize these truths, and you create your culture to counter all the shitty parts of us and to accentuate the good ones.
In an excerpt from his Northern Philosophy, Warren says, "We all share the same origins, no matter what you believe in. We are all one species, the institution of man. Once my people came into the land we now call our home, we became the Yupik people. This identity, this culture, was co-created with the environment. It is all reflective of the land we inhabit, our culture, our language, our dance, our food, and our clothing. The Yupik people came into existence here."
Just something to think about, like, what is your narrative? Like, what do you believe about what's happening here in this world? Like, why are we here? Where did we come from? Where are we going? And what's the point of all this, right? And I'm not asking you to answer that, but it's an important question to ask, right? And there's multiple narratives going on about like what's going on here, and we actually have our own, right? And this is why I think like Northern philosophy is so important, right? Because there are things that I don't think that we should take lightly, right? So one of the things that I think that's really important is this idea that everything has a spirit, right? The reason why I think that's important is because it kind of helps you to contextualize your world better, right? Like it helps you to learn to appreciate and understand that like everything around you, that everything has a purpose. This is like Marie Kondo level, but like that, so our culture, like it really does have a lot of similarities with Eastern culture in some respects, right? So like on her show, she's like, make sure you say thank you to your damn shirt before you throw it away, right? Because there's this idea in like Shinto or whatever, that like things, if you use them long enough, can become conscious, and that you should have some appreciation of them. And I think that even though it's not a perfect analogy, the idea that everything has a spirit and that everything should be seen and respected in that way, I think is important. Like think about the consequences it has for people that live the world with two different views. One where it's the mundane world. You know what I mean? Like, this world is meaningless. We don't know why we're here. There's probably no reason why. There's no such thing as morality. There's a narrative that's being put out there. It's a very nihilist narrative, but it is a narrative nonetheless, right? The idea that there's nothing going on here, that it all came about as chance, and that can all be explainable, that's a narrative, right? There's competing narratives out there, and ours isn't one of them, And what is our narrative? Like, what do we think is going on here, right? Like, what is the purpose of this, right? And I think about that a lot because I wonder, like, why we ended up where we ended up, right? Especially, like, way up north, right? With Diablo, right? Like, it's like, at some point you would have thought maybe you would have stopped, being like, it's getting pretty sparse up here, you know what I mean? Like, there's no berries up there, and so, but at some point, right, you think that you would stop, but then I wonder, like, how did we end up where we ended up, and why did we end up where we end up? And I think about, like, the lessons that the environment taught us, and about, like, well, really, like, what is going on here, right? Is there a bigger story? Did this all happen for no reason, or was there a reason, right? And I'm not trying to, like, claim, like, I have what I believe, and I treat it as though it's the truth, right? But I also recognize that there are competing narratives, and that, like, I might not have the truth. But the narratives themselves are important, right? Do animals have spirits, right? One narrative says yes, the other one says no. Are humans more important than animals? One narrative says yes, one narrative says no, And, like, the no narrative is one I think that's really popular in our community. Like we, even among the salmon fellows, right? So I'm one of the Alaska salmon fellows. And I was having a conversation with one of the other native members of the salmon fellows, right? And there was, like, within the conversation was this implication, that fish were equal with humans, right? Like salmon, that we're equal to humans, right? That we were not more important than them, right? And I had to push back because I was like, but because in my personal belief, I was like, well, no, and I used this. I was like, all right, if I had to choose between every salmon in the world and my child, I'd sure miss salmon. If I had to choose between every salmon in the world and your child, I'd sure miss salmon. And because there's a hierarchy there that I believe, right? And again, you don't have to believe it. I'm not saying it's like the truth, right? But like competing narratives. And in my narrative, no, they're not more important than us, but they are part of the same thing. Like the fish are part of our story, and like it's like this thing, right? The poem I wrote for First Alaskans was called The Hunt, and that's what it was about. It was about this spiritual aspect of it. Like the way that I see it and the way that I characterize it, is that the animal is willingly giving itself as a sacrifice to God for you. You know what I mean? Like whatever's going on here, it's their sacrifice to you. It's their contribution to whatever's going on here. Mm-hmm. And it's your responsibility to make sure that sacrifice is worth it. What are we doing? Mm-hmm. These narratives are not something that people think about anymore, right? And I guess the new narrative is that there are no narratives, right? Like this is, I try to start rereading the postmodern condition so that way I can be more prepared. Just be like, he said this, because sometimes I'll like remember stuff wrong and be like, Jean-Francois Lyotard said blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he actually didn't say that. And I was like, oh, that's what I remembered,
No, but I think that you bring up an interesting point in how, and it's something that I was just thinking about. It's like, if you're creating this like Inuit philosophy, mm-hmm. and you're talking to another native person who thinks that like salmon is at the same level you have different understandings. Is it difficult to try to create this philosophy when there's disagreements among Inuit people? Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a case to be made for both. Mm-hmm. Both sides of the argument in that particular one. But I do think that, this has got to be one of the most important things that we're doing right now, right? It's like kind of like reclaiming, re-identifying like who we are, right? And what are the important parts about that we want to preserve, right? It's like I can be a native person, I can be a Yupik person and wear button-up shirts and Jordans and, you know what I mean? But what's the important part? What are our values? And is this world that we live in compatible with those values? Mm-hmm. There's room for us here, right? But I don't know if they'll accept it if we try to do it. You know what I mean? There's some historical precedent for our country killing people that they don't like the way that they live. And so if we start to reassert ourselves, maybe it'll get there, but doubt it. Anyways, so I do spend a lot of time really trying to get in the heads of other people and understanding it, because I didn't vote for Donald Trump. But I'm kind of thinking about doing it this next election. If they give me some other garbage candidate, I might, just out of spite. It is kind of doing a lot of great things.
Well, it's
under,
it's forcing us to reckon with ourselves is right. What it's doing, and okay, so maybe there might be a dangerous game to play, right? Like the nuclear arms treaty that just expired, and they're all right. So it's okay, so this is perhaps a serious game. When I was trying to think about different ideas and solutions today, one of the things that I thought was it feels like maybe in an ideal world that we'd let the Democrats decide what we should do and then let the Republicans decide how we should do it, right? Because it's you got this group of people, that I really would argue that one group of people is much more rooted in reality, right? Mm-hmm. And this is, again, why I think that I kind of fall on this war side, because I'm kind of not, I'm kind of out there on the fringe and progressive and ready to change things, and right. But it's weird because I also feel really conservative, because the progress that I'm trying to make mm-hmm. is really conservative. I'm trying to go back to ancient Eskimo values, right? So it's not really progress, right? But our traditional values are progressive to white people, right? Because our traditional values about sharing and about stewardship of the environment, about generosity, all these things, that's their progress. That was our status quo. But again, how do we do it in this world? How do we be true to ourselves? How do we move forward? Is there room for us here? And values don't lose their importance in the context, So I started writing, and I never finished it, but it was just an idea that I had that was so good that I wished I had the whatever. So if anybody hears this and they want to write it, you can feel free to steal the idea. But it was this idea about that in the future, of course, our planet's dying, and that we have figured out how, that we can travel to another planet, right? But it will take us 400 years to get there, and there's no way around it, right?
And so in the story, it was Yupik people, a group Yupik peoples and indigenous peoples that